guys, I am Troy from Halloween Hellmouth, and today I'm going to be showing you guys how to do a faux moss application on your Halloween props, like this tombstone right here, using real moss. So you might be asking yourselves, well, why don't I just get some moss and glue it onto my tombstone like this one right here? Well, there's a reason for it. Moss like this is that you put on the tombstone that you get from the craft store, and it just peels off. It doesn't stay. So now you get moss all over your storage area. If this moss stays in the front yard, depending upon what type it is, it could breed more moss in your yard, and for summertime barbecues, you don't want that. You want your yard to be looking good in the summertime. So I want to teach you guys my concept of what I've come up with. This is the list of the stuff that you guys need for this project. Your prop piece or tombstone, a bag of moss, a paintbrush, a mixing stick, a bowl, preferably one that you don't care about or your wife won't mind if you ruin, or husband, a clean spray bottle filled with water, a pan or something that fits the same base of the piece that you're working on if you're doing this inside to catch any of the water from the tea staining, acrylic paints to try and match the same color of the moss that you wish to make. In this picture here I've got leaf green, avocado, real yellow, burnt sienna, buttermilk, and this one right here is used for tea staining. This is just black. And a blender with a lid. And that's all you guys need to start the project, so let's get to it. There's many different benefits of doing it the way that I'm going to show you. I use paint so that it's going to be weather resistant. It's going to adhere to your tombstone, so it's not going to just flake off, but it's still going to have the real appearance of real moss, because you can't get more real than real, right? Moss grows in areas that don't get a lot of light simply because moss can't dry out. It likes damp environments, but moss can also grow just about anywhere. It doesn't need any nutrients for the ground that it grows in. So that's why a lot of the times you will see moss in cracks of the sidewalk, or in tombstones. It's often in cracks, and the reason for that, that's where the moisture lies, and it does need a little bit of dirt in there, fine dirt, so that it can hold on. Moss doesn't have any roots, not like a regular plant does, so it doesn't need a whole lot to hold on to, but it does need a little bit. So I'm going to show you how to make the moss, how to apply it, and then after it's applied and after it's dried, I'll show you how to do a little tea staining on it so that it looks like an area that moss would actually grow. You can get moss at your local craft supply store. You can find moss in your favorite Halloween store around that time of the year, or online. Or if you live in an environment that you have moss in your yard, you can even use the moss in your yard. Just make sure that you dry it out thoroughly first. And you can do that just by letting it sit out on the counter. I wouldn't suggest putting it in the oven. That could be bad. So the first thing you want to do is you want to take your moss and you want to put it in the blender. I can't stress enough that if you use your wife's blender, do it when she's not home. Make sure you get it cleaned up. And you guys might want to do this outside because it tends to create a lot of dirt, dust. So basically, puree the moss. And this is what I'm talking about, dust. So when you're done with your moss, you want it to have a nice texture, very small pieces. It'll still clump together if you do that, but it should break apart very naturally into small pieces. Let's say you're going to a convention and you want to show your friends your moss. I'd recommend not putting it in baggies or not bringing it with you because it really doesn't look like moss right now. There's no real right or wrong way to mix your paint when you start doing your moss. I like to have a bag of moss right next to it so that I can try and make this moss the same color when I start mixing the paints. So basically what I do is I start off with like the base color, and you want enough to get in there and you want to saturate the moss, but you want to leave a little bit of room for putting a little bit of extra paint in the very end, and I'll show you that here in a second. And a little bit of red. So basically just start mixing it in there, and like I said, you don't want to use too much. You want to get all the moss saturated. You don't want to leave any dry moss in there. And you can always go back and add more paint, but you can never ever take paint out. And I'm using just a I'm using a chopstick. Go figure that one out. Okay, it's just a little bit too green, so I'm going to take just a little bit of this and streusel it in there. And the moss will naturally absorb the paint, and there's a reason for that. When you put it on the tombstone, you want it to absorb paint so that it gets the texture. So you want to get this mixture just so that everything's damp and saturated a little bit. Not totally. You see there's still like chunks in there that look like they're kind of dry. That's fine for right now. Do just a tad bit more red. Burnt sienna. I'm going to put just a tad of yellow in here to try and get it more back to this brownish color just a little bit. Okay, so just before you think one of two things. Either you're going to have too much paint in it, or the color's perfect, which color, it's not 100%. But it's kind of there. So for the final touch, I'm going to streusel in again just a little bit of the brown, and let's do just a touch of the yellow again. Right, so just a little bit. It looks like ketchup and mustard, huh? This you're not going to mix fully in with it. You're going to mix it until you still have little bits of color in there, because the moss is different colors. So about that is what you want. You still have some reds in there. Hey guys, remember what I said about when you start doing the moss always goes like in the grooves, because that's where it likes to live. So I'm just going to take some of this and start to sprinkle it into the crack and kind of push it down a little bit. Kind of wedge it in, and sometimes it'll help if you want to lay your tombstone flat or whatever piece you're working on, because I'm having a lot of it go, but I'm trying to show you guys, so I've got a lot of it like going on the on the table right now. So I'm just going to use my fingers. Makes it a lot easier. So we're going to take this and stuff it in the crack of the tombstone. And if you get paint, because the paint will mush out a little bit, if you get paint around it, that's completely okay, because it'll help basically show that the moss is growing all over. And just tap it onto the tombstone or whatever your prop piece is, and when you put the moss into the cracks, make sure you push it a little bit. You want the paint that's in it to kind of come out just a little bit. Because the paint is what adheres it to the tombstone. So you want to use your finger and kind of mush the paint out so it makes contact underneath the moss. the moss application is complete. This is all I'm doing on this piece. And as we start to get closer, and I'm doing it very slow for a reason, you'll begin to see that the moss has started to absorb some of the paint. And as the paint dries, more of the texture of the moss will come out. Because the application of the moss that we put on here is fairly thick, it fills up that whole crack, we're going to leave this to dry for probably about 3 days. And before you guys start to freak out and be like, 3 days? Yes, 3 days for epic moss realism. It's a couple days later, and the moss is now dried. You can see how the texture has totally come out in it because the moss has absorbed the paint. So that's the front part. Here's the back part. And remember, like I said, guys, it doesn't matter that you get paint on it because moss goes out to the sides. So this right here just helps accentuate the buildup of the moss. So the last step to this is to tea stain the moss. However, on this tombstone, there's already a lot of tea staining that's been done. So I don't want to do a whole lot more. I just want to accentuate the moss. Normally, you would tea stain after you've done your moss. So if it was a tombstone, you would go and paint it up, put your moss on it, and then do the final tea staining of it. Normally I would do this outside, but being that the time of year right now is not favorable, I'm using a pan to catch everything, catch all the water and paint runoff from the tea staining we're about ready to do. Just going to take some black paint and highlight the edges. Then once that's done, take your water, and you just let it run down naturally. So it doesn't get much easier than this. I didn't do a time on it to figure out how much time it took, but it wasn't that long. Extremely easy to do, and you still get the realism of moss that's durable, weather resistant, and it's going to last you guys for years, even if you live in rainy Washington and you've got your props out all month long. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you have any questions, post them down in the comments and I will answer them as they roll in. So thank you guys for watching.